This is it, folks. Come along for the ride. It will be my last year next year, and it will be known as a fan appreciation tour.
Seven-time Winston Cup champion, King Richard Petty.
Now, you may not follow the NBA. You've heard of the Boston Celtics. You might not be an NFL fan. You've heard of the Green Bay Packers. You may not be a racing fan. You've heard of Richard Petty.
Richard Petty holding on to that lead like a hammerhead shark. Here he comes.
This president comes to greet a king, Richard Petty, one of the great Americans. Richard, I'm proud to be at your side.
He's a hero in my eyes, and he's a hero in those people that stand in that line to get that autograph.
We love you, Richard! We love you!
Well, I can't say one word of bad about Richard Petty, and I don't think nobody else can.
Petty is out in front, at the line, wants it to the inside. Petty wins it!
I don't think that I'm really going to realize what I've done until probably this time next year when I come to the Daytona 500 and all of a sudden big STP 43 is going around the racetrack and Richard Petty's sitting there watching it. Then that's when it's going to really hit home.
The scene, Daytona Beach, Florida. The time, February 1992. The story, Richard Petty, stock car racing's most recognizable celebrity, is saying farewell after 35 years in the driver's seat. The kickoff of the 1992 Winston Cup season created an all-out frenzy as fans and the media scrambled for a piece of the man they call King. The around-the-clock attention foreshadowed what was to come on Richard's Fan Appreciation Tour. This is the story of a racing legend, the story of his life, and the story of his final 29 races. The tempo of Richard's last year began on a high note.
The award is called the STP Richard Petty Achievement Award, and it is presented for outstanding achievement in and contribution to the Daytona 500.
He went at a breakneck pace throughout the 10 days of Speed Weeks.
That didn't curve.
Sorry, Richard. Do it, okay? I can't keep up with you, Richard. Thanks a lot.
I hope not. I'm not quite fast enough.
Filming a music video with the country music group Alabama simply added to the pandemonium.
And he just is calm, an old country boy, and he just loves people. They talk about Billy Graham can raise the people on their feet. When Richard Petty last year in the 125s passed Schrader and took the lead, I seen 3 people in wheelchairs standing, so he got everybody beat. He's the king.
Today's race marks Richard's final Daytona 500, a race from which he has garnered a record 7 victories. Richard's hard-charging father, Lee Petty, set the Petty precedent at Daytona by winning the first 500 in 1959.
In the final stretch, Weatherly is high on the track. Lee Petty in the center, Beauchamp below him. The checkered flag. The race is over. Both Petty and Beauchamp clock in the identical time. 3 hours, 41 minutes, 22 seconds. Petty and Beauchamp both wheel to the winner's circle. Both accept congratulations of the crowd in one of the most amazing finishes ever recorded in stock car racing. The official decision, based on photos such as this, gave Lee Petty in number 42 the victory by a margin of less than 1 yard.
Richard went on to win his first in 1964 in a Plymouth.
I believe when Chrysler came with the Hemi engine in 1964 and he totally dominated the Daytona 500 in 1964, I think that's when we all realized that, hey, this man is really going to be something in this sport, not only as a driver, but as a human being.
Richard took his second 500 in '66, averaging 160 miles per hour and earning a total purse of $28,150. He won again in '71. Took the checkered flag with STP in '73.
With the checkered flag, Petty becomes the only man in history to win the Daytona 500 4 times.
And he won again in '74. But it is win number 6 in '79 that ranks among his luckiest. He was a distant third. Cale Yarborough and Donnie Allison were out front, battling for the lead.
Where will Cale make his move? He comes to the inside. Donnie Allison throws the block. Cale hits him. He slides. Donnie Allison slides. They hit again. They drive into the turn. They're hitting the wall. They're head on the wall. They slide down to the inside. Let's watch those third place cars. They're out of it. Who is going to win it? Coming down. Third place. They're coming around for the finish. Coming down. Richard Petty is now pulling out in front. Darrell Waltrip is in second. A.J. Boyd is in third. Here they come. Waltrip trying to slingshot. Petty is out in front at the line. Waltrip to the inside. Petty wins it.
2 years later, at the 1981 Daytona 500, Richard's cousin and longtime crew chief Dale Inman made a daring decision to forego fresh tires at the final pit stop of the race.
They're not changing tires. A change of pace here for the Petty crew. They're only adding gasoline and either way, a very quick pit stop. What strategy? We'll see how it works.
I remember telling Richard about halfway through the race, I said, if we don't change tires, don't worry about it because they're not going to wear out. I mean, it was one of those deals, they would run the whole race probably. So it got down to Allison made his stop first, and I said, man, we might do a little something here because I figured like 2 more of them would not do anything but just gas, and come to find out all of them changed tires but us, and we just dumped 1 can and give us about a 7-second lead, and we got lucky again.
A battle of giants.
Right up there with Richard's host of Daytona 500 wins is one infamous loss, a 1976 heart-stopper to the Silver Fox David Pearson.
Richard Petty goes back in front. They both spin. They're in the wall. Petty is sliding, slamming into the wall. He's coming down toward the finish line. Will he make it? He's still moving. The car stops 300, 400 feet shy of the finish line. Pearson is still running. Here's Petty trying to fire to come across the line. David Pearson moving down through as they come to the stripe. The winner is car number 21. It's going to be, I believe, Pearson's victory. You'll just have to wait and see.
He was quite a bit faster than I was that day. And I knew that, and the only way I could get by him is draft by him. And I drafted by him, going down the back stretch. And he had so much more power than I did, like I say, that day, that he just come right back around me. And I think he was thinking if he could get in front of me and block me, that I couldn't draft him back by him by the time he got to start and finish line, or his car could have been a little bit too tight and pushed up in front of me. And when he did, he caught my left front fender, you know, when he came up. And when he done that, of course, both of us spun. And but if that hadn't happened, he had me beat.
Well, they done been some tears for me, you know, like at Daytona, you know, I said, you know, I won't have no trouble until Atlanta, but he was a grand marshal and they give him a standing ovation at the driver's meeting. That was, you know, pretty touching.
the gentleman representing the Kingdom of Random in North Carolina please start his engine?
In the role of Grand Marshal, Richard gave a little petty twist to the traditional famous words for the start of the race.
Okay, guys, let's go. Crank them up.
Well, it may not be the prototypical gentlemen start your engines, but an okay, guys, let's go is all they've got to hear from Richard Petty as the Daytona 500 by STP is about set to roll off the line.
Those who came out to pay their respects to the man who helped make stock car racing what it is today felt a surge of emotion as the familiar 43 led the field around the high banks of Daytona on the parade lap. In the early stages of the race, Petty was slowly picking off opponents and moving up from a 32nd starting position.
Maybe the best start has been that of Richard Petty. He went outside about 5 cars into the inside of 1 or 2 others.
A good run was shaping up for the team until Richard was swept up into an accident not of his making.
Careful, careful. Watch out, Richard, watch out. Watch out, Richard, watch out. Oh, Lord, we done got spun. Are you okay?
I'm going on both ends, but I'm coming around, buddy.
The crash put an end to any hope for victory number 8. The crew got their driver back in the race and ended up with a not too shabby top 20 finish, placing 16th. But for the king and his court, anything short of a win is simply a loss. 54 years old and winless since 1984, the fires of competition still burn in the blood of Richard Petty. Richard was born in the heart of the tobacco-rich Piedmont of North Carolina, in a town called Level Cross. The tiny hamlet is a stone's throw from Randleman, where he lives today. This is a picture of Richard and his younger brother Morris, Richard on the left.
We had no running water, no electricity, no telephone and stuff till I was about 12 years old. No indoor plumbing, any of that kind of stuff. We finally got electricity. I think we got a telephone. And we got running water, but no bathroom. Till I was about 13 or 14, we moved back to where Mother and Daddy lives now beside the shop, and we finally got a bathroom. But the deal was that all those years we was growing up, people up the road, people right down the road, they didn't have any electricity, they didn't have running water, they didn't have a bathroom either. So we were no better, no worse off than them.
As children, Richard, Morris, and cousin Dale spent many a day racing old wagons, and as they got older, stripped down bikes. At the end of a long day of racing, they'd cool off in their secret swimming hole, Polecat Creek.
Yeah, this looks like it right here. Filled in a little bit.
Yeah, it ain't over your ankles now. It used to be over our heads.
Yeah, remember the rocks up there, though, and we slid down into the pool. This is it. It's just filled in over a period of years.
That's where my water moccasins used to slide in over there, too, while we were swimming.
Yeah, we come up the bank on this side there. We're getting poison oak again. That's where the water would come around the bend there and come over the hill and then eat out a big hole here.
On your mark, get set, go! Cheater!
What it must have been like nearly 45 years ago. The three musketeers of Polecat Creek. Carefree country boys with an early love for speed and competition.
We had our bicycle races, and we were probably as dedicated to them as we've always been with racing, because if we wound up with a new bike, we had to cut the fenders off, every what it needed to race.
At that particular time, when we first started this, my father wasn't even racing. This was back in the mid-40s. And you know, we was 7, 8 years old, stuff like that. We started doing our bicycle racing around the house.
We tried to do a little everything to outfox the other one, even back then.
Been a long time since two country boys went swimming here, and we've come a long, long way, buddy. You can bet on that.
There's a lot of miles behind us from here, but I don't know if we could go through it again or not.
I wouldn't want to.
The Petty racing legacy spans 3 generations. The latest of the Petty clan to take the wheel is Richard's only son, Kyle. If any current driver has a piece of the rock, it's Kyle Petty. He's won from the pole at Rockingham twice in 2 years. And today, for the 4th time in a row, he has qualified at the head of the pack.
He knows more about it than I do. He's won here 11 or 12 times. I had one here but twice, so he knows a whole lot more about it. He's forgotten more than I know about it, I'll just say that.
They brought a different car here. Kyle's still able to have a stout run with them with a different race car this track.
The Mellow Yellow team was having a solid run, but this was not destined to be Kyle's day. The car didn't hold up. Mechanical problems put him out of the race.
Goodbye, greenbacks. Yep.
A broken camshaft ended hope for 3 in a row.
An interesting fact.
Do you think you missed the setup because of the extreme heat that you're not used to seeing here this time of year?
No, I didn't have nothing to do with it. We just missed it, man.
Well, obviously they didn't miss it in qualifying. End of the day for Kyle Petty, as they reported upstairs, a broken camshaft.
There is Richard, who will carry number 43 through this season, and then hang up his helmet after Atlanta in what is sure to be a very emotional race.
The crew for the King, on the other hand, was having a pretty good day. They ended up with a repeat performance from Daytona, finishing 16th. Before heading north to Richmond, Virginia from Rockingham, Richard took some time out to wish wife Linda a happy 50th birthday.
Let me zoom in. Zoom in on it, Austin. And the president's in there. I'm just so thankful to have all of y'all for friends. That's more than anything in the world.
When Linda Owens first met Richard Petty, he was a high school senior.
She was a pretty friendly person. I was a pretty friendly person. I was like 5 years older than she was. And I played football, baseball, basketball, and I kept going back to all the games and stuff that we got to when we wasn't racing. And she was a cheerleader, and you know, one thing led to another, but I don't know whether it was an older man or whatever it was, you know what I mean? You'd have to ask her, I don't really know.
I just thought he had the prettiest brown eyes, and I told him, I said, the one thing I love the most about you is your brown eyes, and I tell him that now. I say, you know, through all the years, I still love your pretty brown eyes. Now he wears those sunglasses all the time, and not many people get to see them.
Attracted her to me, I had a car.
Richard and Linda dated for a couple of years and decided to get married in 1959.
We went to South Carolina, went to Chesterfield, South Carolina. Drove down there one night and took out the marriage certificate, and had to drive back home because I had to wait 24 hours or something. And then went back the next night, got married, and you know, I think it cost me $25 or something. I tried to get $12.50 out of her anyway, she wouldn't pay. And we came back to Rockingham, stopped and got us a hamburger, and drove back home, and I took her home, put her out. I went back home, went back to work the next day, and she went back to school. So, you know, we was married, I don't know, what, 4 or 5 months or 6 months or something. I don't even know, before we told anybody.
That's right, they eloped. Their parents weren't altogether happy about the secret marriage, but what was done was done. And Linda's senior year turned out to be a pretty special one. She was a cheerleader, homecoming queen, voted best looking in her senior class, and graduated as Mrs. Linda Owens Petty. She and Richard started their family soon after getting married and eventually had 4 children. Their firstborn is their only son, Kyle. You know what they say, once a ham, always a ham. Kyle began a career in racing at the age of 18. For a while, he drove a race car and pursued a second career as a country music singer. In the late 80s, Kyle parked his singing career and today devotes his full attention to racing.
You know, I have people come up to me every once in a while and they'll say, your son, when is he ever going to grow up? And I say, never, because why should he? His father never grew up. I mean, they're like boys that have just been able to just enjoy playing, doing what they've done all these years, and they've been happy. Yeah, you be careful.
Oh, honey, that's right.
Him and Mom are just like
He is the only 32-year-old son that still calls his mama every day to check in and tell her what's going on and ask her advice on something. And
I call her every day, and I don't know if that's growing up in the South or whatever, but I've got a lot of friends that call their mothers every day too, so that's not a problem. But, you know, and you have to look back at the way we were raised too. My father was gone so much that 50% of the time, then my mother was the one that looked after us. She disciplined us. She got us in trouble. She got us out of trouble. But, you know, we grew up that way.
Kyle currently lives in High Point, North Carolina, with his wife, Patty, 2 sons, Adam and Austin, and a daughter, Montgomery Lee.
Kyle is so different from Daddy. I mean, Kyle's the kind of person that whatever he wanted to do, he did, and he did it perfect. The first time. He wanted to ski, he could ski perfect. He wanted to snow ski, he could snow ski perfect. He wanted to play tennis, he was a pro at it. I mean, we've lived with that all our life. You know, so Kyle wants to drive a race car, let him drive a race car. I mean, you know, you don't worry about Kyle. He don't worry about himself. We don't worry about Kyle. We're all daddy girls.
That's right.
It was Michigan. He was making his 1,000th start. It was Father's Day. And they had his daughters give the command to start engines. No one knew what was going to happen. It was a total surprise. And the girls said, Daddy, start your engine.
Daddy, start your engine!
That was very, very emotional. Probably as emotional as I've ever been in a race car, win, lose, or draw. I mean, we're sitting there and they say, Daddy, start your engine. I mean, you know, and I'm so excited. I tried to start the thing, I even got the switch turned on. You know, I mean, it really was an emotional deal.
The first of Daddy's girls is Sharon. She and her husband, Terry Farlow, live in Sophia, North Carolina, where she is a first-grade teacher and he is a dairy farmer.
Well, she told me I had to ask her father about marrying her, so I was real nervous, as you can imagine. And I asked him, and I said, I didn't ask him if I could marry her, I just asked him if I could give her a ring, and of course, being Richard Petty, the type of guy he is, he asked me if I needed any money. So.
Here on the farm, they're raising their 2 daughters, Hannah and Maggie. The middle daughter, Lisa, lives in Richmond, Virginia. She's a homemaker, married to former Busch Grand National driver Charlie Luck. He now runs the family business, Luck Stone. They're the parents of 2 children, Richard Jr. and Sarah.
So we're more like buddies.
The youngest of Richard and Linda's children is daughter Rebecca. She's a sophomore at East Carolina University, studying commercial art. If anybody sees a side of the king that the public doesn't see, it's his family.
Thank goodness for microwave popcorn. He has conquered it because he can put it in the microwave and in 43 seconds, he can fix his popcorn. That's the first thing in 55 years he's learned to do for himself.
You have to wonder, in 1959, did little Linda Owens have any idea what marrying Richard Petty would mean to her life?
We never looked down the road and said, well, 30 years from now, racing's going to be where it is right now. We never dreamed it would change from right where we were at. I guess what makes us different from some of the other people there today is that we were way back here. Richard was there when it started, in those very first years when he was a little boy that just climbed up on the windshield and wiped it off for his dad because he was driving. And he knew then that he had a love with that automobile and the racetrack that was never going away.
This afternoon from the State Fairgrounds Complex in Richmond, Virginia, the third race of the 1992 season. It's the Pontiac 400.
And now for the most dramatic words in the world of professional sports, our Grand Marshal Linda Petty.
Let the Pontiac excitement begin. Gentlemen, start your engines.
Richmond International Raceway is one of Richard's best tracks. He has 13 wins here. While he found a good groove for today's race, a decision to pit under green cost the team a strong finish.
We pitted, lost a couple laps, and then right after that they had a caution, so that put us 2 laps down. That just changed the whole velocity of the race. So we made a mistake on that part of it, but the way the car run and the way the crew performed, I was real happy with.
The balloons are released, the pulse quickens, and we are ready to go racing. Doyle Ford gives them the green flag, and we are racing.
Watching Richard's smooth moves around Atlanta Motor Speedway, it was easy to think of this as a dress rehearsal for November 15th, the date of Richard's last race.
Tell you who else is running good here this afternoon. He's not at the front of the pack right now, but he's up about 13th place, and that's been Richard Petty, and that car has been real consistent and very handling real well in both ends of the speedway since the opening gun earlier here this afternoon.
The story of the day for all the drivers was bad tires.
Caution, Richard. I guess it's a NASCAR caution. I don't know, but I don't know what it is. Caution's out. Oh, good, good. Stand on there right front, buddy. I'm scared to death of it. That's right, I backed off. I slowed down because I was scared of that tire. It felt like it wanted to push more than what I thought it ought to.
Like most of the field, Richard couldn't make moves on tires that wouldn't stick to the racetrack.
What happened? They ain't sticking. It's too cold. Tires ain't sticking.
He's probably got every bit of the competitive fire. The difference in him now and the way he used to be is he's probably a whole lot smarter. If he's got the car underneath him and it's driving good and the motor's running good, he'll put the thing up front and he'll run it as hard as he can run it. And he'll race wheel to wheel with the best of them. If he doesn't have the car underneath him, he's been in that situation so many times that he doesn't try to race them guys or give them a hard time. He just gets out of the way.
The potential for a win in Atlanta was foiled by equipment problems, but Petty Enterprises still came away in 16th, their third top 20 finish of the season. Next stop on the Fan Appreciation Tour, Darlington, South Carolina, home of the Stock Car Hall of Fame.
Lee Petty was the first 3-time Winston Cup Series champion, winning the title in 1954, 58, and again 59.
When Lee was driving, stock car racing wasn't that big a deal. They might have, instead of looking up on you as being somebody to work on a race car, probably in those early days they looked down on you because you did work on one, or maybe because your daddy did drive one, because they claimed that a lot of them, you know, came through the ranks as bootleggers.
Let me tell the story, I can tell it all, about the mountain boy who ran illegal alcohol. His daddy made the whiskey, Sonny drove the load. When his engine roared, they called the highway Thunder Road.
I'll put it this way, while he raced, he never run moonshine.
Each time they thought they had him, his engine would explode. He'd go by like they were standing still on Thunder Road. And there was thunder, thunder over Thunder Road. Thunder was his engine and white lightning was his
At the time that we came along, that was beginning to change because there were other families. There were some that were still carrying on the tradition of being the carousers, but it was changing, and it was becoming a more family-oriented type situation.
What began as tinkering under the hood of a Model T Ford developed into a passion for Lee Petty. He and his brother Julie began running dirt tracks all over the South. By 1949, NASCAR was formed, and Lee decided to make Grand National Racing his full-time career.
Lee was tough on that little short track, and it was a heck of a show. Dirt, and you come home so dirty you'd have to find your eyes and wipe the rubber and the calcium chloride and the red dirt and dust out of it.
The driver of car number 42 turned out to be a pioneer of the sport and ranks even today as one of racing's greatest drivers. His 54 career victories place him among the top 10 drivers with the most wins in stock car history. In 1958, at 21, Richard decided to try his hand at racing. His first race was in the convertible division on July 12, 1958, in Columbia, South Carolina. The younger Petty chose the now legendary number 43, a logical choice given Lee's number 42. It took almost 2 years after his debut for Richard to win a race. His first was in February 1960 at a half-mile dirt track in Charlotte, North Carolina. He and his father were competitors until 1961. This was the year Lee's career came to a shattering close. Lee and Johnny Beauchamp went up and over the high Daytona banking. Their cars landed outside the track, demolished. Lee barely survived the crash. He was in a Daytona Beach hospital for 4 months. He had a punctured lung and a broken leg that would leave him with a limp for the rest of his life.
You know, here was a 23-year-old kid, and his kid brother, 22 years old, that had to take the business up. I mean, you know, I had went to school to keep books, but I had never kept books. I had never written a check. You know, I'd never done any of this stuff. So all of a sudden, you know, I'm having to work on the race car, drive the race car, get up enough money to pay the help, keep up all the books, records, and stuff like that. So, you know, we'd get up all the bills during the day, and I'd come home at night and put them in the book, write the checks, go out the next day and go buy parts or get somebody to go get the parts and stuff. So I had a growing up at one time. In other words, I grew up in 1961.
Lee did get back in the car after the crash, but he never regained his former fire for the sport.
Way back then, you was a mechanic, or at least you was learning to be, and I was doing the driving. Now I do part of the mechanic work, and you do the driving. I don't know which one's the hardest. I think it's much harder for me to stand on what you drive than it is for me to do the work.
Lee and Elizabeth Petty still live in Level Cross, next door to Petty Enterprises. Now in his late 70s, Lee prefers to spend most of his time on the golf course. And when it comes to publicity and interviews, he'll have none of it.
He's done made his mark in life. Now he's leaving it up to, he left it up to Richard and myself, and now he wants to see it passed on to like Kyle and Timmy and Mark and Richie. You know, he says that, you know, the less he stays out of limelight, the more limelight they'll get.
Program, starting lineup.
At Darlington, Richard had the honor of throwing the green flag for Saturday's Busch Grand National race. By the time the green flag was thrown for Sunday's Winston Cup event, Richard was ready to take on the track that's too tough to tame. The team was having a decent run when midway through the race, the STP number 43 appeared to have mechanical problems. A broken valve put them behind the pit wall, and for the first time this season, they were unable to finish a race.
We thought we had a pretty good chance to run good. You know, we knew we weren't going to win the race, but if we could have continued to run as good as what we'd been running the race, we could have finished the first 8 of 10.
Bristol, Tennessee's diminutive half-mile track appeared to be the antidote to the venom of the Lady in Black. A strong qualifying run put Petty in the 14th starting position.
Just got to be off just a little bit, and you wind up being a difference from 15th to 30th. And we're real tickled to be where we're at.
this is a kind of a racetrack that's very demanding physically and mentally. And it's so close. You get around the racetrack in 16 seconds, and you know, you run into the corner and something happens coming off the corner. First thing you know, you've hit it. You can't stop that quick. So you know, you just got to really be careful. You're lucky to be able to run all day long and have all the sheet metal left when the race is over.
Here's Sterling Marlin. This is the start-finish line going out in turn 1. Following Ricky Rudd. As he exits turn 2, we'll see the car all of a sudden it just turns right, like he did in Dalton last week. See, the car just all of a sudden, the right front goes down and into the wall. Along comes Richard with nowhere to go.
And I was in the middle of the track, and when he come down right dead in front of him, and I didn't get a chance to cut right or left.
The bang-up at Bristol set the stage for coming weeks. First, North Wilkesboro on lap number 7.
2 straight weeks in a row. Bad luck for Richard Petty.
Make that 3 weeks in a row.
I tell you what, Richard just cannot get a break.
Are you tore up? The right front. Need to check the right front, Robin. It's banged up bad on the right front. In 4.
Got spun out twice, spun out once on my own, I guess, just because somebody didn't hit me. But it is a close racetrack, and it's tough to run all day long and not tear up some fenders.
Talladega, Alabama. Depending on your viewpoint, this is a racing paradise. The track is one of the biggest, the heat is the hottest, and the fans are some of the wildest. Followers of auto racing are about as devoted a group of sports fans as you'll find anywhere.
Elliott! Yeah, baby!
And some of the most devoted fans of all are Richard Petty's.
As you see here, I have a scrapbook I've had since I was 12 years old. I figured I'd have him sign it. I have an original picture here I took when I met him there at that time. And, been a Richard Petty fan all my life.
I love him. I don't understand that, you know, 5, 6, 7-year-old kids are big Richard Petty fans, and Richard Petty hadn't won a race in the last 8 years. They want to hug you, give you sugar, and, you know, they're just 4 or 5 years old, and it really makes you feel good.
A few have taken their Petty mania a little farther than others. Joe and Pat McKenzie of Charlotte, North Carolina, for example. They go to most of the races.
The vows, when she married me, she also married Richard Petty, too. Could pull for nobody else.
And like most infield campers, they proudly display their favorite driver. What sets them apart from most race fans is, well, see for yourself.
I have display all the hats in a certain way in the room itself. I have numerous pictures of him. I have other items that I've collected over the years that I will not bring to the track itself.
Think the McKenzies are a rarity? Meet Bill and Faye Helms of Raleigh, North Carolina. Yes, they have a Richard Petty room in their home and a Richard Petty car.
Well, Faye won that car in one of the Pepsi outings here at the fairgrounds. And just one of those deals, you know, got lucky, never won anything before in our life. And right now we're planning on keeping the car. I think it's got 300 and some few miles on it now, and it sits in the garage, and I guess it'll just stay right here. I started going to the races with them, and eventually I ended up working with them for about 5 or 6 years, and just started collecting stuff back in the early, I guess, 70s, and it just sort of got to be a habit, and that's the way it all started.
A granddaddy of a Richard Petty collection can be found in Richmond, Virginia, at the home of Hugh Hawthorne, a personal friend of the Pettys since the late 50s, and he's one of the few fans who owns not pieces of a car, but actual cars.
I've got a scrapbook that goes back many, many years with his first cars and all in it, clippings out of newspapers. And then as time progressed on and we became closer friends, I got the 70 Superbird from him that won 18 races, and that was my first major piece. After I got the Superbird, he sent me the driving uniform that he drove the Superbird with.
All right, buddy. Okay.
0494. Okay.
Naturally, these folks are among the 14,000 members of the Richard Petty Fan Club. Over the course of the season, Richard will attend 6 fan club meetings, most coinciding with the weekend race, like tonight's meeting in Anniston, Alabama, just outside of Talladega.
I've been doing it, this is my 19th year, and there will probably be upwards to 130, 40, 50 people here tonight, and they come, most of them are members, not all, but people hear about it and they just come. They know where we live. We've lived here for almost 30 years and fairly notorious in the area for being, I can get mail addressed to the Petty Lady, D'Armonville, and I get it.
Signs of Barbara Nelson's allegiance to the king are everywhere. From her jewelry to a room in her house that's, what else, decorated with Richard Petty memorabilia.
Well, one of the things that we have probably the most discussion about is our Petty wallpaper. Years ago, I can't even tell you how many, probably 15, Sears had it in a catalog on sale. And so I have Petty wallpaper.
I think it blows my mind that anybody would take up with anybody enough to dedicate a basement or a garage or a room in their house just to one sports figure. I don't care whether it's racing or football or whatever it is, but a lot of these people have things of Richard Petty's that date back 35 years.
Just as he has done every year during Talladega race weekend, Richard shows up at the Nelsons' home and patiently signs autographs.
He's comfortable to be around. He has no airs. You know what I mean? He just puts on no airs. He's just Richard. He's just the same to everybody. Whether you're, you know, the lowest person or the richest person, he's just Richard.
All right, ready to go. Hey, how you doing?
Time and time again, Richard's consistency and integrity are what stands out in people's minds.
He's truly the greatest athlete I have seen and known in my lifetime, from the standpoint that nothing seems to ruffle him. He has been as approachable by the fans throughout his lifetime, even though he's a superstar of all superstars. And you've got to appreciate that in an individual.
I think from the very beginning that he built his career in an unusual way. Many times that I have left the racetrack late, long after the crowd had disappeared, and he would still be down in the pit area or wherever signing autographs. And he did do a lot for the sport. He promoted it, and I don't think he even knew it. I think it came from the inside. I think long before this year come along that he was a fan appreciator of him within himself.
All right.
Hey, I never thought I'd say that.
Richard is as warm and friendly with one guy
I've been following him a long time.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
as he is the
Through the
next.
shop, and everybody just stopped working on the cars. Had to go over and talk to him and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, and then we stopped and had a chew together.
You got it, man.
I know. There's not too many people in life who have chosen a profession and has reached that pinnacle of success that Richard Petty has. I mean, there's been a lot of people who have won races, a lot of people who have had hit records in my field, but to do what he's done and to do it with the class that he's done it. And I think that says it all. He's a class act.
Richard Petty meets his share of famous people, and frequently there is much in awe of the king as the fan in the stands.
We've had 41 presidents in the United States, but we've only had 2 kings. And some think one of those died, Elvis, and the other king's right out here in NASCAR.
I guess I kind of got weak kneed. You know, you meet the king and you meet the legend of car racing, of NASCAR racing. I mean, not too many people get a chance to have an audience with the king.
Then there was the time Richard Petty took time out to talk to a shy 8-year-old boy.
He got closer and closer. The next thing I know, he was right at the fence right in front of me. And he says, "Hello, young man, what is your name?" I said, "My name's Mr. Brad Daugherty." And we talked, and he gave me an autograph, and we talked a little while, and he told me about, you know, how he was running that day, and glad that I came out to the racetrack to watch him. And that impression, you know, on me was just tremendous.
Now an NBA All-Star, Brad Daugherty's jersey bears the number 43, a tribute to his hero, Richard Petty.
On the yellow flag, please slow down, because if we're going to move equipment, we have got to get the equipment up to wherever the car is located.
Running in the second pack at Talladega was exactly what Richard planned to do, and did. Overall, it was a fairly uneventful race, with one exception.
Charlie stands. Charlie Watchback, who won the ARCA race. Is he going to save this? No, there ain't no way. No, caution is out. Yep, he makes pretty hard contact.
The number 43 never joined the lead pack, but for the first time for weeks, the team had a solid finish, landing in the 15th spot. At the end of days like today, you can see the toll a long, hot race can take on a man. Talladega has been tough on Richard Petty in more ways than one.
Of course, then in '75, you know, my brother worked for Richard and was killed in his pits in Talladega, and that was a dark time for all of us, because that was our family, and it took a lot out of all of us.
When Linda's brother got killed, that was probably the most difficult time that I've ever been through in my whole life, because it was family, you know what I mean, and I was responsible to a certain extent, in the sense that Randy would not have been at the race if it hadn't have been for me.
Leaving behind the heat and humidity of Talladega, the Winston Cup teams headed to North Carolina for the hot, bright lights of the Charlotte Motor Speedway.
It's pretty cool. I hope the lights go out, and then we're going to have some fun.
The cars really look like they're going fast when it gets dark at night.
Real excited. It's going to be fun for us, because it's just going to be different running on a 1.5-mile track at night.
Everyone was excited as night fell for the running of the Winston.
Now the big show is about to begin. They've got strobe lights flashing down in Victory Lane. They've got skylights sweeping the sky atop the Charlotte Motor Speedway. And better than 1.2 billion candle power of light has illuminated the speedway as we get set to start the Winston.
After Davey Allison led the first leg of the race, the sellout crowd voted to invert the field for the second half. Richard Petty was in position to take the lead for the first time in years, and the crowd knew it.
I was about to say, I hope all these new lights are screwed on tight, because if Richard Petty takes the lead here in the Winston, this place is going to start shaking wildly, and we'll see what happens. Here goes Richard looking inside of Bodine if he can do it.
Richard fell back, but Kyle poured it on to take the lead for most of the second half. It looked like Kyle had it won until the last lap. Davey slipped by Kyle to take the checkered flag. Allison versus Petty, battling side by side, banging sheet metal lap after lap, ending with a dramatic, exciting, and narrow finish. Sound familiar? It should. The Richard Petty-Bobby Allison duels were some of the most exciting in motorsports.
You know, he was really good in the car. And something that I've said and I've bragged about is that we did really, really rub on each other a lot. But we both always made it back to the finish line. In today's world, two guys go to rubbing on each other, and it takes all the wreckers and all the cleanup crews and the whole deal to clean the mess up that they make.
Richard and Bobby downplay the intensity of their feud. But in the 60s and 70s, the respective crews and the fans were passionate about the rivalry.
I know there were times that he went through some situation where a fan would come up and come right to him to get his autograph, and as they got to him, they, well, you dirty rat, you did this and that to our good old friend over there. Because I had people that did that to me. You know, they come all the way through that line, and boy, don't you dare ever back into Richard Petty again.
I don't think it bothered Richard so bad. I think me and Maurice was the one that was in on that with maybe Bobby, but Richard wasn't, it really wasn't that big a deal to Richard, I don't think.
All I had on one thing on my mind, that was to win races, and I didn't care how we done it, who we stepped on, who we run over, or who I talked to, or how I talked to him. All I wanted to do was win. And then he played the good guy role. I guess I played the bad guy role.
You know, I'd been reading all this stuff, and I met, I think both crews was coming out of the garage there one day. I said, hold it. I said, I'm getting tired of hearing this. And I said, the next time I read what anybody says on one side or the other, I said, I'm gonna whip the snot out of it. So everybody just said, okay. You know, they done had their fun with it. They thought it should be dropped too.
The legendary battles between Richard Petty and Bobby Allison have long since ended. A crash at Pocono prematurely ended Bobby's driving career. A decision to retire will end Richard's, but their legacy lives on. The week between the Winston and the Coca-Cola 600 gave the Pettys a chance to spend a few days at their condo at the Charlotte Motor Speedway and to attend a special tribute concert featuring Kenny Rogers.
I personally cannot remember a time in auto racing when there was not a Richard Petty, and it's
I read an article once that talked about the ways you can live your life. One is a carousel where you have no frills and no thrills and no danger, or you can take the roller coaster, but the good news is when you start looking back, you've got a lot more excitement with the roller coaster. And I think that's what he's got. He's got all of his memories.
Richard Petty's life has been anything but short on excitement. But when you look beyond the surface of his superstardom, you'll find a man who places value not on wealth and fame, but on the people who have been with him from the very beginning.
This is my 22nd year with Petty Enterprises.
I've been with Richard about 24 years now, I think.
I've been with Richard 19 years.
Well, I've known Richard for 40 years. It goes back to 1952 when we were in high school together.
Linda and I grew up together.
Sometimes I think about the people that's been dedicated to me for, 25 or 30 years, that's helped us with the race car, worked for me, done a lot of different things for us and stuff. And I believe in loyalty, okay? It's kind of a deal that if you've helped me get where I'm at, then I'm gonna try to help you stay where you're at.
We just sort of hung around with Linda and Richard, and we all fixed a lunch together, and we would eat together and laugh and have a good time before the race, and going to the race, it was a big game, and coming back, it was a big game, and we just had a good time doing it.
Two of Richard and Linda's closest friends are Ed and Randy Parks. They started out as Lee Petty fans and grew to be Richards.
In the early days when he'd run those little 100-mile dirt tracks, he'd have to wear 2 or 3 pairs of goggles. And during the race, one pair would get just covered up with mud and dust and all, and he'd have to flick it off. And then after another few miles, he'd have to go to the 3rd goggle. And then when the poor thing would get out of the race car, that was before the day of the driver uniforms. Sometimes he'd just have on a regular sports shirt or something. And he'd get out and all you could see is just the white of his eyes. He was completely covered in dust and mud, and you just wonder, he's probably breathed in a ton of dirt in his day.
The friendship between the Parks and the Pettys bridges more than 30 years. This year, Richard and Linda have invited a few of their closest friends to join them on the Fan Appreciation Tour. It was especially important to the Pettys to include Randy and Ed, Ronnie Hucks and Ralph Salvino.
Welcome, America, to Charlotte, North Carolina, home of the 600.
The Coca-Cola 600 is the longest race of the year and typically one of the hottest. This could be a day to test Richard's mettle. Early in the race, the number 43 Pontiac, moving through traffic, gaining positions, was a welcome sight. All indicators pointed to a good run. When suddenly, the car went into the wall coming out of turn number 3. The crew put Richard back in the race, but just over a fourth of the way through, he was out of the race for good.
Lost the brakes running off in 3 there, and then from then on the rest of the day, it's just been, you know, riding around out there with no brakes, it's dangerous. And then they had a wreck down there, I guess Mark spun out, run off in there, just spun out and hit the wall, you know, no brakes, that's all you can do.
Didn't have nothing but rear brakes, and every time I touched the brake, it'd spin, you know, lock up one of them and spin out. So, you know, we tried to stay far enough back. They just closed the track up on me up there, and I had to put on the brakes and finally used the car up completely.
What should be apparent by now is that this season and the Fan Appreciation Tour brought with it an unbelievable schedule.
You know, he's working 8 days a week, it seems like. Every time you call down there, he's going somewhere, doing something.
One week, he flew to Tallahassee when the Florida State Legislature passed a resolution honoring his accomplishments.
We're so pleased to have with us today the king of stock car racing, Richard Petty.
A couple of weeks later, he hosted his annual celebrity golf tournament in Asheboro, North Carolina.
1, 2, 3.
That's just a sampling of his schedule. Listen as his secretary rattles off a week in the life of Richard Petty.
Dover, on the Tuesday before he left, he had a photo shoot. He had 3 appointments in the afternoon that we had to cover. Then he went to Richmond.
I tell you one thing,
and left all day for Richmond for the Roy Clark concert. He had 2 concerts that day that was covered. Then he came back to Dover, and then he had the Crook and Chase television that they covered. That was after he had done the practicing and the time trials during the day, so that was at night. Then he had a press conference in between practicing and another practice with the Gwaltney hot dog people announcing his Richard Petty hot dog.
I guess that's really what we're doing here. Trying to tell y'all to keep selling the big A's, but let's sort of push these here a little bit. I'm working on commission, so.
Then he had a fan club meeting on Saturday night. Then he raced at Dover. He left from Dover to go on out to California because first he had to stop at Hastings, Nebraska for a Pontiac appearance. From there he went on to California. On Wednesday at California he went to the Oakland A's ball game and threw out the first ball.
Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the pitcher's mound where the king of stock car racing, Richard Petty, will toss out today's ceremonial first pitch.
I got it there. I got it there.
They got this deal called a dot race, is that what it is? Yeah. Anyhow, they had that in the 4th inning, and I won. Hey, how about that, guys? In 8 years, I finally won a race.
Next stop on the Winston Cup Tour, Sonoma, California, wine country. The 2.5-mile Sears Point International Raceway rolled out the red carpet for stock car racing's Royal Monarch.
it was really, really unexpected. I knew there was a lot of racing fans out there, but I didn't know there was that many Richard Petty racing fans.
They had a line going up over the mountain, going left and right, with people just standing in line waiting to get his autograph. And I don't think he ever thought about it. You know, who would have thought 15 years ago that there'd be 4,000 people standing in line at Sears Point, California to get his autograph? And I think it's humbled him to a certain degree, and I think that's been kind of neat to watch, because I don't think he really knows how big an impact he's had on a lot of different people.
One of Richard's wishes this year at Sears Point was to prevent a repeat of the year before. In 1991, he slammed head-on into a solid retaining wall. While it wasn't one of his more visually dramatic crashes, it was one of his most physically exacting.
Yeah, we had a bad wreck. You know, one of the worst wrecks I guess I've had in a long, long time. Broke my leg on the right side, right leg, and pulled the ligaments on my left leg, and you know, I hobbled around for a while.
This year, the crew had two objectives: to avoid an accident and to finish the race. Richard Petty is none too fond of road courses, so to finish without getting hurt would be satisfying enough.
This is the first of the lasts for Richard Petty. This is the first track this year at which he'll be making his final appearance, as we only come to Sears Point one time. And in honor of that, and as will be the case throughout the second half of the season, on the first of the pace laps, Richard Petty's car, the STP Pontiac, is ahead of the field.
Richard guided the number 43 through the S's with a sure and steady hand. No showboating, no unnecessary risks. Really only one slight misstep around the halfway point.
Kyle Petty running well in 6, but Richard Petty just in front of Bill Schmidt, spinning in turn number 11, tags the inside tire barrier, but he continues along.
When the day was done and a 21st place finish was posted, the crew could only celebrate. They had accomplished their goals.
That's checker name, Richard. That's it. That's it. We made it. Hey. Made it one piece, too. That's like winning compared to what we did here last year. Amen.
For someone who prefers driving oval tracks, Richard has had his share of success on road courses. While he holds no victories at Sears Point in the 4 years the track has been on the circuit, at its predecessor, the old Riverside Raceway, he holds 5 wins. That track has long since been bulldozed, but it could be he just had that track figured out. On the way back east from wine country, the Pettys made a pit stop in Nashville, Tennessee. Richard Petty had the honor of presenting the annual Minnie Pearl Award on TNN's Music City News award show.
And presenting the award is a personal hero of mine, king of the race car drivers, ladies and gentlemen, Richard Petty.
After the awards ceremony, Petty packed up and headed for Pocono. This, they felt, would be a race they could win.
Yeah, this is one of our better race tracks. You know, no matter where we run, how good we run anywhere else, we usually run pretty good at the Poconos, and we always look forward to coming back. And so far, the car's been working pretty good. We'll just have to go out and run the race and see how it's doing.
One team that is particularly encouraged about today's run is the Richard Petty STP Pontiac team. They are excited. We remember that Richard could have won both races here a year ago if not for some bad racing luck.
The STP team raced fast and solid, but didn't get the win they were hoping for. They ended up in 16th place. The following weekend, fans in Michigan were bundled up for some unseasonably cold weather. And hey, Kyle, forget something?
Hey, good luck. Happy Father's Day, man. I got all about here Father's Day.
Michigan was basically a carbon copy of Pocono. Richard ran in the middle of the pack for most of the race and ended up, where else? In 16th place for his second top 20 in a row. Was Richard Petty a little disappointed? Maybe. Frustrated or bitter? Not a chance.
You know, it's like I tell the boys at the shop. I said, look, you know, we didn't win the race today. The driver messed up, or y'all messed up. Big deal. Everybody done everything they thought they could do. And that's good enough. That's all I ask. You do 100%. Well, nobody does 100%, but you do as much as you can and do as good as you can. If you mess up, you mess up. I mean, me getting on to them boys or them getting on to me or whatever, hey man, that's done in the past. Just learn from that. Try not to let it happen again. Maybe next week, luck will be on our side.
The Miller Genuine Draft 400 at Michigan marked the midway point for the Winston Cup season and put Richard Petty that much closer to retirement. The first half of the 1992 Winston Cup season was an eventful one for the king of stock car racing. He may not have had great success behind the wheel, but he was met with fanfare in every off-track moment. Early in the year, an 8-mile stretch of Highway 220 was dedicated in his name. He also found time to further his education, as Pfeiffer College in Wingate, North Carolina, presented him with an honorary doctorate of humanities.
I confer upon you the degree Doctor of Humanities.
The highlight would have to be having a doctorate degree, but you know, Dr. Richard Petty. Now, I don't know how that'd go over for my patients, but it went over real big with me.
I'll still call him Richard, probably. That won't change at home.
With the first half of the fan appreciation tour behind him, sights are set on part 2.
A big part of Richard Petty is still driving a race car. 50% of him might be the businessman and the owner, but there's another 50% of him that all he knows is driving a race car. And I think once he climbs out of that car the last time, then he'll leave that 50% in there. And what kind of personality he has will probably be the same. And the way he treats people will probably be the same, but he won't be the same Richard Petty.
There are only 14 races left until Atlanta in November, when Richard Petty will climb behind the wheel of the number 43 one last time. If you thought the first half was something, hang on. The best is yet to come.